The elevator climbed 47 floors in complete silence, carrying the most feared man in Chicago toward his glass throne. Harrison Cole stood motionless as the numbers flashed by, his steel-gray eyes reflecting nothing but the cold emptiness that had consumed his soul for the past 15 years. Every morning the same ritual. Every morning, the same hollow ascent to a corner office that felt more like a prison than a palace. The doors slid open with a soft whisper, revealing the pristine marble lobby of Cole Industries. Immediately, conversation stopped. Keyboards fell silent. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath as Harrison's polished Italian leather shoes clicked against the floor with mathematical precision. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," whispered his assistant Beth, her voice barely audible as she averted her gaze to her computer screen. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a stack of documents, the papers rustling like autumn leaves in her nervous grip. Harrison didn't respond. He never responded. Words were for the weak, and weakness was a luxury he couldn't afford. His father had taught him that lesson with ruthless efficiency during those brutal childhood years when affection was rationed like wartime supplies and love was considered a character flaw. The glass walls of his office offered a panoramic view of the city below, where millions of people scurried about their daily lives like ants in a concrete maze. From this height they looked insignificant, disposable, replaceable. Just like everyone in his life had proven to be. His phone buzzed with the first of what would be dozens of calls. Board meetings. Acquisitions. Hostile takeovers. The endless machinery of capitalism that had made him richer than small countries but poorer than the homeless man who slept outside his building. "Sir, the Johnson account is ready for your review," Beth's voice crackled through the intercom, careful not to disturb his morning routine of staring at the city and feeling absolutely nothing. Harrison pressed the response button without looking up. "Send them in." 3 executives filed into his office like condemned prisoners approaching the gallows. They wore expensive suits that couldn't hide their terror, carried briefcases that contained hopes he would inevitably crush, and spoke in voices that betrayed their knowledge that one wrong word could end their careers. "Mr. Cole, we've prepared the quarterly projections as requested," the lead executive stammered, his forehead glistening with perspiration despite the Arctic temperature Harrison maintained in his office. "The numbers look promising for the third quarter, assuming we can negotiate the Peterson contract successfully." Harrison's eyes moved from the window to the trembling man before him. In that gaze lay the accumulated weight of 1,000 ruined competitors, failed partnerships and abandoned relationships. It was the look of a man who had learned that power meant isolation, that success required sacrifice, and that the only person you could trust was yourself. "The Peterson contract is worth $12 million, Harrison said, his voice carrying the emotional warmth of a winter storm. "You're telling me your team's competence is worth betting $12 million on?" The executive's face drained of color. "Sir, we believe our strategy is sound. The market research indicates." "I don't care what the market research indicates. I care about results. Results are the only language that matters in this office, and results are the only currency I accept as payment for my continued tolerance of your employment." The silence that followed was suffocating. 3 grown men, each earning more money than most people saw in a lifetime, stood frozen like deer in headlights, waiting for permission to breathe. "You have 48 hours to close the Peterson deal. If you succeed, your departments get their budget increases. If you fail, you clean out your desks and find new careers. Those are the only 2 options available to you." As the executives fled his office like survivors of a natural disaster, Harrison returned his attention to the window. Somewhere far below, normal people were having normal conversations, sharing normal moments of human connection, experiencing the normal warmth of relationships that weren't based on fear and financial dependency. He had tried that once. Marriage, companionship, the promise of growing old with someone who claimed to love him. But love, he had learned, was just another business transaction. When his first wife left him for his business partner, taking half his assets and most of his remaining faith in humanity, Harrison had made a decision that shaped every day since. Never again would he allow emotion to cloud his judgment. Never again would he mistake temporary affection for permanent loyalty. Never again would he open his heart to the inevitable betrayal that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Cole, your lunch appointment with the mayor has been confirmed for 1 o'clock. The car will be ready at 12:30. Harrison didn't respond. He rarely ate lunch anyway. Food, like sleep and human contact, was a biological necessity he tolerated rather than enjoyed. Everything in his life had been reduced to its most efficient, emotionless form. As the afternoon wore on, employees moved through the building like ghosts, careful never to make direct eye contact, speaking in hushed tones, treating his very presence like a dangerous electrical current that could destroy them with the slightest contact. This was his kingdom. Cold, efficient, profitable, and completely devoid of anything resembling warmth, kindness, or hope. Harrison Cole had built an empire on the foundation of human fear, and every day that foundation grew stronger. But somewhere in the building below, as evening approached and the day shift prepared to leave, a different kind of person was getting ready to enter his world. Someone who didn't know the rules. Someone who had never learned to be afraid. Someone who carried something more powerful than fear, more valuable than money, and more dangerous to his carefully constructed walls than any corporate rival could ever be. Someone who believed in the simple magic of homemade cookies and the healing power of a child's smile. What happens when unstoppable innocence meets immovable coldness? Will one little girl's kindness be enough to melt a heart frozen by decades of betrayal? Don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think will happen when these two worlds collide. The Cole Industries building transformed as darkness fell across Chicago. The fluorescent lights dimmed to energy-saving levels, the endless parade of suited executives disappeared into the night, and the real heroes of the building began their quiet, invisible work. Denise Washington pushed her cleaning cart through the lobby at exactly 8 o'clock, just as she had every weeknight for the past 3 years. Her navy blue uniform was perfectly pressed, her tools organized with military precision, and her smile warm enough to melt the perpetual chill that seemed to hang in the air of this corporate cathedral. At 28, Denise carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to find pride in honest work, no matter how others might judge it. Her grandmother had cleaned these same types of buildings for 40 years, and she had taught Denise that there was honor in making the world a little cleaner, a little brighter, one floor at a time. "Mama, can I help with the windows tonight?" asked 6-year-old Amara, her voice echoing softly through the empty lobby. School was out for the summer, and Denise's usual babysitter was visiting family out of state, which meant Amara got to be her mother's shadow during the quiet nighttime hours. "You can help me organize supplies, sweetheart," Denise replied, her voice carrying the patient love that only comes from a mother who has learned to juggle work and parenthood with grace. "But remember our rule about the upper floors." Amara nodded solemnly. "Stay close to Mama. Don't touch anything expensive. Use my quiet voice." The little girl wore a bright red dress with white flowers, her hair twisted into perfect braids adorned with colorful beads that clicked softly as she moved. Her eyes held the boundless curiosity of childhood, and her smile could brighten any room she entered. They began their work on the ground floor, Denise methodically cleaning and sanitizing while Amara helped by carrying small supplies and wiping down surfaces she could reach. Their conversations flowed naturally, covering everything from Amara's upcoming first-grade year to the funny shapes clouds made during the day. "Mama, why don't the people who work here during the day ever say hello to us?" Amara asked as they finished the third-floor break room. Denise paused in her scrubbing, considering how to explain the complex social dynamics of their situation without damaging her daughter's natural faith in human goodness. "Well, honey, sometimes grown-ups get so busy with their important work that they forget to notice the people around them. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they have a lot on their minds." "But saying hello doesn't take very long," Amara pointed out with the logical simplicity that children excel at. "It's just one word." "You're absolutely right, baby. Maybe someday they'll remember that." As they moved to higher floors, the building grew even quieter. The executive levels were carpeted in thick burgundy that muffled their footsteps, and the walls were lined with expensive artwork that Amara studied with the focused attention of a museum visitor. "This one looks like ice cream," she whispered, pointing at an abstract painting that probably cost more than Denise's annual salary. "What flavor do you think it would be?" Denise asked, grateful for her daughter's ability to find joy and wonder in unexpected places. "Mint chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles." They worked in comfortable companionship, Denise's movements efficient and practiced while Amara contributed in small but meaningful ways. The little girl had developed her own routine over the summer weeks, creating games that made the work feel less like labor and more like adventure. On the 20th floor, they encountered the first evidence of the building's mysterious top occupant. Security cameras became more numerous, the artwork more expensive, and the very air seemed to carry a different weight, as if the presence of so much power and money had changed the atmospheric pressure. "Mama, why does it feel different up here?" Amara asked, her young instincts picking up on something her mind couldn't quite define. "Some people carry heavy feelings with them, sweetheart. When someone is sad or angry for a very long time, it can make the places they spend time feel heavy too. Like when I'm mad about having to clean my room and the whole room feels grumpy." Exactly like that, but imagine being that grumpy for years and years. Amara considered this seriously. That sounds very tired. Being mad for years would make anyone very tired. By 10 o'clock they had reached the 40th floor, just 7 levels below Harrison Cole's private domain. Denise had been explicitly instructed never to clean above the 40th floor during business hours, and to only venture to the executive levels after 10:30 when she was absolutely certain the building was empty. "Can we have our snack now, Mama?" Amara asked, settling onto a comfortable chair in the break room. Denise pulled out a small cooler containing apple slices, string cheese, and 2 homemade chocolate chip cookies she had baked that morning. Amara bit into her cookie with obvious pleasure, closing her eyes to savor the combination of butter, brown sugar, and chocolate chips. "Mama, your cookies are magic," she declared, chocolate smudging the corner of her mouth. "Magic how, baby? They make everything feel better. Like when I'm scared about starting first grade, or when you're tired after working all day, or when Mr. Rodriguez downstairs looks sad about his sick wife. One bite of your cookie and the scared feeling goes away." Denise smiled, thinking about her own grandmother's belief that food prepared with love carried special healing properties. Maybe there was truth to that old wisdom after all. "You know what, Amara? I think you might be right about that magic." After their snack, they gathered their supplies and headed for the elevator that would take them to the mysterious upper floors. As they rode up through the final levels, Amara pressed her face against the glass, watching the city lights twinkle below like earthbound stars. "Mama, do you think the man who works up here ever looks out at those lights and feels lonely?" The question caught Denise off guard with its insight. "Why would you think he feels lonely, sweetheart?" "Because lonely is the heaviest feeling of all. And this whole building feels so heavy." As the elevator doors opened on the 47th floor, revealing the marble and glass kingdom that Harrison Cole ruled with iron determination, neither Denise nor Amara could have imagined that tomorrow night would be different. Tomorrow night, the building's 2 worlds would collide in the most unexpected way possible. Tomorrow night, a little girl with magic cookies and an unlimited capacity for kindness would meet a man who had forgotten that such things existed. Wednesday evening arrived with an unusual complication. Harrison Cole sat in his office at 8:15, long past his normal departure time, staring at documents that refused to make sense no matter how many times he read them. The Peterson contract had fallen through spectacularly, the board was demanding explanations he didn't have, and worst of all, someone had leaked sensitive information to his primary competitor. For the first time in years, Harrison Cole was not in complete control of his empire. His reflection in the window showed a man who looked older than his 42 years. Silver touched his dark hair at the temples, and lines of perpetual concentration had carved themselves around his gray eyes. He wore a navy blue suit that cost more than most people's cars, but tonight it felt like armor that had failed to protect him. The phone had finally stopped ringing around 7:30. His assistants had gone home. The cleaning crew would arrive soon, and then he would have the building to himself as he preferred. Solitude was honest. Solitude didn't betray you or sell your secrets to competitors. He heard the elevator chime softly in the distance, followed by the familiar sound of the night cleaning crew beginning their work. They would start at the bottom and work their way up, reaching his floor around 11. By then he planned to be gone, having solved the crisis through sheer force of will and caffeine. But the numbers on his computer screen continued to mock him, and the solutions that usually came so easily remained stubbornly elusive. 47 floors below, Denise and Amara were making unusual progress through their routine. Amara had been extra helpful tonight, and they had finished the lower floors earlier than usual. By 9:30, they were already heading toward the elevator that would take them to the executive levels. "Mama, I saved one of the magic cookies for someone special," Amara announced, pulling a carefully wrapped chocolate chip cookie from her small backpack. "Who's the lucky person, sweetheart?" "I'm not sure yet. But I think I'll know when I see them." Denise smiled at her daughter's logic. At 6 years old, Amara operated on instincts that adults had long since forgotten how to trust. If she felt called to share a cookie with someone, Denise had learned not to question that impulse. They cleaned their way steadily upward, floor by floor, until they reached the 47th level. The elevator doors opened to reveal the marble lobby of Harrison Cole's domain, and Denise felt the familiar weight of entering a space designed to intimidate and impress. But something was different tonight. Light spilled from the corner office, and the soft glow of a computer screen indicated that someone was still working. "Mama, someone's here," Amara whispered, her voice carrying curiosity rather than fear. Denise felt her heart rate spike. In 3 years of cleaning this building, she had never encountered anyone on the executive floor during her shift. Her instructions were clear. If Mr. Cole or any of his staff were present, she was to return later or skip that floor entirely. "We need to come back later, baby," she said, reaching for the elevator button. But Amara was already walking toward the light, drawn by something Denise couldn't see. Her small red dress moved like a bright flower through the sterile white marble hallway, and her beaded braids clicked softly with each step. "Amara, honey, come back here," Denise called in an urgent whisper. Inside his office, Harrison heard voices in the hallway and looked up from his computer with irritation. The cleaning crew wasn't supposed to be here for another hour, and they certainly weren't supposed to bring children into the building. He stood up, prepared to deliver the kind of sharp rebuke that would ensure this never happened again. But when he reached his office doorway ready to unleash his displeasure, he found himself face to face with the most unexpected sight of his adult life. A small African-American girl in a bright red dress stood in his hallway, looking up at him with eyes that held no fear, no deference, no recognition of his power or position. She simply smiled, as if encountering strangers in empty buildings was the most natural thing in the world. "Hello," she said, her voice clear and warm. "Are you working very late tonight?" Harrison opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. When was the last time someone had addressed him without fear? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen just a person rather than a threat to be avoided? "Amara, sweetheart, come here right now," Denise called from the elevator, her voice tight with panic. She could see her daughter talking to the most dangerous man in Chicago, and every maternal instinct screamed at her to intervene. But Amara didn't move. Instead, she reached into her small backpack and pulled out the carefully wrapped cookie. "You look tired," she said to Harrison, holding up the package. "My mama makes magic cookies. They make heavy feelings lighter." Harrison stared at the offered cookie as if it were an alien artifact. No one had offered him homemade food since he couldn't remember when. Gifts that came his way were always calculated, always designed to win favor or seal deals. But this child was offering him something with no agenda beyond kindness. "Magic cookies," he repeated, his voice hoarse from hours of phone calls and stress. "Mama says food made with love carries special healing. I think you need some healing tonight." The simple words hit Harrison like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had suggested he needed healing? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen pain rather than power? "Amara, please," Denise called again, now walking quickly toward them. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. She doesn't understand. We'll leave immediately." Harrison looked from the child to the woman approaching them. The janitor who had been cleaning his building for years, whose name he had never bothered to learn, whose existence he had barely acknowledged. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fashion or artifice, her face showing the kind of strength that came from handling life's challenges with grace. "What's your name?" he asked Amara, accepting the wrapped cookie with trembling fingers. "Amara Washington." "What's your name?" "Harrison Cole." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harrison. Are you going to try the cookie?" Something in her expectant expression, something in the way she waited with complete confidence that he would accept her gift, broke through 42 years of carefully constructed defenses. Harrison unwrapped the cookie and took a bite. The taste exploded across his palate like a memory of childhood, of kitchens filled with warmth and laughter, of a time before business consumed everything good in his life. Brown sugar and butter and chocolate chips, but underneath those flavors was something else, something indefinable that made his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. "It's good," he managed to say, his voice rougher than he intended. "I told you they were magic," Amara said with satisfaction. "Do you feel a little bit better now?" Harrison looked down at this remarkable child who had appeared in his sterile world like a ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the answer to that question was yes. Could one innocent act of kindness really begin to heal decades of hurt? What will happen when a billionaire's frozen heart meets a little girl's warm cookies? Subscribe to find out how this beautiful story unfolds, and tell us in the comments about a time when a small act of kindness changed your day. The next morning, Harrison Cole arrived at his office carrying something he hadn't possessed in years: curiosity about another human being. The wrapped remains of Amara's cookie sat on his desk like evidence of a dream he wasn't quite sure had really happened. "Beth," he said to his assistant, his voice lacking its usual edge of controlled intimidation. "Yes, Mr. Cole," she replied, bracing herself for whatever unreasonable demand would follow. "The night cleaning staff. How long have they been working for us?" Beth blinked in surprise. In 12 years of working for Harrison Cole, he had never asked about the cleaning crew. She pulled up files on her computer, grateful for a task that didn't involve crushing someone's professional dreams. The current team has been with us for 3 years, sir. Dependable, thorough, never any complaints from building security about their work or conduct. The woman with the child. Is it standard procedure to allow family members in the building during working hours? Beth's fingers moved nervously across her keyboard. Actually, sir, Denise Washington filed the proper paperwork when her summer childcare arrangements fell through. She received approval from Human Resources to bring her daughter during evening shifts, provided the child remained under supervision at all times. Denise. Her name was Denise. Harrison repeated it silently, surprised by how much he wanted to know more about the woman who had raised such an extraordinary child. And the child's age? 6 years old, sir. Starting first grade in the fall. 6 years old. The same age Harrison had been when his own childhood ended abruptly, when his father decided that sentiment was weakness and kindness was a luxury they couldn't afford. By age 6, Harrison had learned to hide his feelings, to view every interaction as a potential threat, to trust no one completely. But Amara Washington had looked at him with eyes that sparkled with trust and warmth, offering him a cookie as if sharing joy was the most natural thing in the world. Mr. Cole, Beth's tentative voice interrupted his thoughts. The board meeting is scheduled for 10 o'clock. Should I let them know you're ready? Harrison looked at his assistant as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Beth had worked for him for over a decade, arriving early, staying late, managing his impossible schedule with quiet efficiency. When was the last time he had acknowledged her dedication? When was the last time he had treated her like a human being rather than a particularly useful piece of office equipment? Beth, how long have you been married? The question was so unexpected that Beth's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Excuse me, sir. You wear a wedding ring. I assume you're married. How long? 15 years, Mr. Cole. Children? 2. Emma is 13 and Jack is 10. Harrison nodded slowly. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and he had never bothered to learn these basic facts about someone who spent more waking hours with him than most people spent with their families. Send my apologies to the board. Reschedule the meeting for this afternoon. Beth stared at him as if he had announced his intention to take up professional juggling. Harrison Cole never rescheduled board meetings. Harrison Cole never apologized for anything. Harrison Cole certainly never showed personal interest in his employees' family lives. Should I give them a reason for the delay, sir? Tell them I'm reassessing our corporate priorities. As Beth hurried away to make the calls, Harrison returned to his computer screen. But instead of financial reports and acquisition targets, he found himself thinking about a little girl in a red dress who believed in magic cookies and healing. The morning passed differently than usual. Harrison found himself listening to conversations in the hallway, noticing details about his employees that had escaped his attention for years. Margaret from accounting had a family photo on her desk showing twin babies. James from marketing walked with a slight limp that suggested an old injury. Carol from legal carried herself with the tired dignity of someone managing multiple responsibilities. These people had lives, stories, joys and sorrows that extended far beyond their utility to his business empire. When had he stopped seeing them as human beings and started viewing them as replaceable components in his money-making machine? Lunchtime brought another unusual decision. Instead of eating at his desk while reviewing contracts, Harrison walked to the 47th floor break room. The space was elegant and well-stocked, but it felt sterile, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. He thought about Amara and Denise sharing their simple snack the night before, their easy conversation and obvious affection for each other. When was the last time Harrison had shared a meal with someone who enjoyed his company rather than endured it out of professional necessity? The afternoon board meeting proceeded as expected. 12 successful executives in expensive suits, discussing market strategies and profit margins with the cold precision of surgeons. But Harrison found his attention wandering to the windows, where he could see ordinary people on the street below living ordinary lives filled with ordinary human connections. Cole, are you listening to Peterson's counteroffer? Demanded board member Richard Hastings, his voice sharp with irritation. I'm listening, Harrison replied, though his mind was actually 47 floors away, wondering what Amara was doing on this sunny Thursday afternoon. Was she playing in a park somewhere, sharing her boundless enthusiasm with other children? Was she asking her mother questions about the world with the fearless curiosity she had shown him? The terms are acceptable, he said, making a decision that surprised everyone in the room. Draw up the contracts. Hastings raised an eyebrow. You're agreeing to their counteroffer. Yesterday you called their terms laughably inadequate. Yesterday was yesterday. Today I'm more interested in building partnerships than crushing competitors. The statement sent ripples of confusion around the conference table. Harrison Cole didn't build partnerships. Harrison Cole identified weaknesses and exploited them. Harrison Cole turned every business interaction into a zero-sum game where his victory required someone else's defeat. But as the meeting concluded and his board members filed out with worried whispers about his uncharacteristic behavior, Harrison realized he didn't care about their concerns. For the first time in years, he was more interested in becoming a better person than maintaining his reputation as a ruthless businessman. Evening approached with unusual anticipation. Harrison found himself checking the time repeatedly, waiting for 8 o'clock when the night cleaning crew would arrive. He had never looked forward to anyone's arrival before, never felt curious about conversations that might happen or cookies that might be shared. At 7:30, he made a decision that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. Instead of leaving for his empty penthouse apartment, Harrison Cole decided to stay late again. Not because of business crises or corporate emergencies, but because a 6-year-old girl had offered him a cookie and somehow managed to crack the armor around his heart. Tonight he wanted to see if lightning could strike twice. Tonight he wanted to discover if kindness was really as magical as Amara Washington believed it to be. At exactly 8 o'clock, Harrison heard the familiar chime of the elevator arriving on the ground floor. He positioned himself at his computer, attempting to look naturally busy rather than eagerly anticipating the arrival of a cleaning crew and a 6-year-old philosopher. The building felt different tonight. Instead of the oppressive weight of isolation, Harrison detected something lighter in the air, as if yesterday's brief encounter had somehow changed the atmospheric pressure of his carefully controlled environment. 47 floors below, Denise and Amara began their evening routine with their usual efficiency, but tonight carried an undercurrent of excitement that Amara couldn't quite contain. "Mama, do you think Mr. Harrison liked the magic cookie?" she asked as they cleaned the third-floor conference room. "I think he did, sweetheart. But remember, Mr. Cole is a very busy man. We can't expect him to be working late every night. But he looked so tired and sad. I think he needs more cookies." Denise smiled at her daughter's simple logic. At 6 years old, Amara operated on the belief that most problems could be solved with kindness, patience, and homemade baked goods. It was a worldview that Denise hoped her daughter could maintain despite the harsh realities that life would inevitably present. "Did you bring extra cookies tonight?" Denise asked, though she already knew the answer. Amara patted her small backpack with satisfaction. 3 magic cookies. 1 for Mr. Harrison, 1 for anyone else who looks sad, and 1 for us to share. As they worked their way through the building, Denise found herself thinking about the previous night's encounter. Harrison Cole had looked exactly as intimidating as his reputation suggested, all sharp angles and cold control. But something in his expression when Amara offered him the cookie had seemed almost vulnerable. It was probably her imagination. Men like Harrison Cole didn't have vulnerable moments. They had calculated interactions designed to maintain power and control. Still, the way he had accepted Amara's gift, the careful way he had unwrapped it, suggested someone who had forgotten what genuine kindness looked like. By 10 o'clock they had reached the 40th floor, and Amara's excitement was becoming harder to contain. She kept glancing toward the elevator that would take them to the executive levels, clearly hoping for another encounter with the mysterious Mr. Harrison. "Now remember, honey," Denise said as they gathered their supplies. "If Mr. Cole is working late again, we need to be respectful of his time. A quick hello and then we let him focus on his important work. But what if he looks tired again? What if he needs another magic cookie? Then we'll assess the situation when we get there." The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt longer than usual, and when the doors opened to reveal the marble lobby, both mother and daughter immediately noticed the light spilling from the corner office. "He's here," Amara whispered, her voice filled with delight. Denise felt her pulse quicken. What were the chances that Chicago's most powerful businessman would be working late 2 nights in a row? Either Harrison Cole was dealing with a major crisis, or something else was keeping him in the office past normal hours. They had barely begun setting up their cleaning supplies when a voice called out from the direction of the corner office. "Good evening." Harrison appeared in his doorway, and Denise was struck again by how different he looked from the cold, distant figure she had imagined. Tonight he wore a green dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his tie had been loosened. He looked less like a corporate emperor and more like an overworked man grateful for a friendly distraction. "Mr. Harrison," Amara called out, abandoning her supplies and walking toward him with the fearless confidence of childhood. "Are you working very late again tonight?" "I am. It seems to be becoming a habit. That's not good for your health. Mama says people need time to rest and play, not just work all the time." Harrison looked toward Denise and she felt heat creep up her neck. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. She doesn't understand the difference between adult responsibilities and— She's absolutely right, Harrison interrupted, his voice carrying a warmth that surprised them both. I do work too much. I have for years. He knelt down to Amara's eye level, a gesture that seemed as natural as breathing but probably hadn't happened in his office since the building was constructed. Did you bring any magic cookies tonight? He asked. Amara's face lit up like Christmas morning. I brought 3. One for you, one for anyone else who looks sad, and one for sharing. Anyone else who looks sad, Harrison repeated. Do I look sad, Amara? The little girl studied his face with the serious concentration of a doctor examining a patient. A little bit sad. But not as sad as yesterday. I think the cookie helped. Harrison felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. You know what? I think you're right. As Amara pulled the carefully wrapped cookie from her backpack, Harrison looked toward Denise. Would you like to take a break? I have a coffee machine in my office that makes excellent hot chocolate. Denise felt her world tilt slightly. Harrison Cole was inviting them into his private office for hot chocolate. Men like Harrison Cole didn't make social overtures to cleaning staff. Men like Harrison Cole certainly didn't offer hot chocolate to 6-year-old girls and their mothers. We don't want to interrupt your work, Mr. Cole. Please, he said, and the word carried a weight that suggested he didn't use it often. Call me Harrison. And you're not interrupting anything important. 20 minutes later, an extraordinary scene was unfolding in the corner office of Cole Industries. Harrison Cole, feared by competitors and subordinates alike, sat on his expensive carpet sharing cookies and hot chocolate with a janitor and her daughter, listening to 6-year-old wisdom about magic and kindness. The secret ingredient is love, Amara explained seriously, holding up her half-eaten cookie. Mama puts love in everything she makes, and that's what makes it taste so good and feel so healing. Love, Harrison repeated as if testing an unfamiliar word. I'm not sure I know much about that ingredient. It's easy, Amara said with the confidence of someone who had never doubted love's availability. You just think happy thoughts about the person you're making food for, and hope that every bite makes them feel better. Harrison looked at Denise, who was watching the interaction with a mixture of amazement and maternal pride. Your daughter is quite remarkable. She gets that from her grandmother, Denise replied. Mama always said that food made with intention carries power beyond nutrition. And what intentions do you put into your daughter's cookies? The question was asked so quietly that Denise almost missed it. But something in Harrison's voice suggested that her answer mattered more than politeness required. Hope, she said simply. I put hope in everything I make for Amara. Hope that she'll always know how loved she is. Hope that she'll always believe the world is good. Hope that her kindness will make other people's lives a little brighter. Harrison absorbed this information like a man discovering a new language. Hope, love, kindness. These concepts had been absent from his vocabulary for so long that they felt foreign, revolutionary, dangerous. But as he watched Amara's animated description of her upcoming first-grade year, as he listened to Denise's gentle corrections and encouragement, as he tasted the lingering sweetness of a cookie made with love, Harrison Cole began to suspect that maybe, just maybe, he had been fluent in the wrong language all along. Friday morning brought news that would have normally sent Harrison into a controlled fury of strategic retaliation. His phone rang at 6:30 with an emergency call from his head of security. Mr. Cole, we have a problem. Someone leaked the Morrison acquisition details to Financial Tribune. The story goes live in 2 hours. The Morrison deal was worth $200 million and had taken 8 months to negotiate. If competitors knew the terms before the contracts were signed, they could interfere with financing or launch their own counterbids. In the old Harrison's world, this would have meant immediate investigations, firings, and possibly legal action against whoever had betrayed his company's trust. But as Harrison sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee and remembering the taste of chocolate chip cookies made with love, his first thought wasn't about revenge or damage control. His first thought was about a little girl who believed that kindness could heal heavy feelings. Sir, his security chief continued when Harrison didn't respond immediately. Should I begin investigating internal personnel for the leak? No, Harrison said, surprising himself with the decision. Schedule an emergency board meeting for 9 o'clock. We're going to handle this differently. By 8:30, news vans had gathered outside Cole Industries like vultures circling wounded prey. Financial Tribune's article had painted the Morrison acquisition as a hostile takeover that would result in massive layoffs, and protesters were already assembling with signs demanding corporate accountability. Harrison arrived at his office to find Beth fielding calls from reporters, competitors, and board members with equal measures of professional grace and barely controlled panic. "Mr. Cole, the board is already gathering in the conference room. Mr. Hastings says the situation is urgent." "It always is," Harrison replied, but his voice lacked its usual edge. "Beth, do you know anything about the night cleaning staff's family situations?" The question was so unexpected that Beth's fingers stopped moving across her keyboard. "Sir. Personal challenges. Medical issues. Financial difficulties. Do we have any information about our employees' lives outside this building?" Human Resources might have some records if there were insurance claims or emergency leave requests. "Look into it." Discreetly. The board meeting began exactly as Harrison had expected. 12 furious executives demanding immediate action, aggressive legal response, and systematic investigation of every employee with access to sensitive information. "We need to find the leak and make an example of them," Richard Hastings declared, his face red with indignation. "This kind of betrayal cannot be tolerated." "Someone in this company sold us out for money," added board member Patricia Stevens. "We need to show the market that we don't accept disloyalty." Harrison listened to their calls for corporate vengeance while thinking about Amara's simple philosophy. Kindness makes heavy feelings lighter. What if, instead of responding to betrayal with more hostility, they tried something radical? What if they chose to respond with unexpected grace? "What if we didn't retaliate?" Harrison said quietly. The conference room fell silent as if he had suggested they abandon capitalism entirely. "Excuse me," Hastings said. "What if we accepted that someone made a mistake, possibly for reasons we don't understand, and we focused on moving forward rather than punishing the past?" Patricia Stevens leaned forward in her chair. "Cole, have you lost your mind? Someone cost this company millions of dollars. They violated their contract, broke their oath of loyalty, and maybe they did it because they were desperate," Harrison interrupted. "Maybe they have a sick family member and needed money for medical bills. Maybe they're facing foreclosure or bankruptcy or some other crisis that made a bad decision seem like their only option." The board stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Harrison Cole didn't make excuses for corporate betrayal. Harrison Cole didn't express empathy for employees who violated their trust. Harrison Cole certainly didn't suggest that desperate circumstances justified professional misconduct. "Since when do you care about employees' personal problems?" Hastings demanded. "Since a 6-year-old girl taught me that love is an ingredient that changes everything," Harrison thought but didn't say. "Since I discovered that kindness might be more powerful than fear. Since I realized that running a company based on fear and intimidation might not be the most effective long-term strategy," he said instead. The meeting ended with reluctant agreement to postpone legal action pending further investigation, but Harrison could see the doubt in his board members' eyes. They were beginning to question his judgment, his priorities, and possibly his fitness to lead the company he had built. But as they filed out of the conference room with whispered concerns about his recent erratic behavior, Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace with a decision that prioritized humanity over profit. His phone buzzed with a text message from building security. "Sir, there's been an incident involving one of the night cleaning staff. Denise Washington was taken to Chicago General Hospital this morning. Emergency contact listed you as her employer." Harrison's blood turned cold. Denise. Something had happened to Denise, which meant something had happened to Amara's mother, which meant that remarkable little girl was facing the kind of crisis that could shatter her faith in magic cookies and healing kindness. Without hesitation, Harrison grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. The Morrison acquisition, the board's concerns about his leadership, the company's reputation, all of it faded into background noise compared to the urgent need to make sure that a 6-year-old girl who believed in love wasn't facing the world's cruelty alone. As his driver navigated through Chicago traffic toward the hospital, Harrison realized that his priorities had shifted completely. 3 days ago, he would have stayed in his office managing the corporate crisis while leaving employee emergencies to human resources. But 3 days ago, he hadn't known that kindness could crack armor that had taken decades to build. 3 days ago, he hadn't discovered that a child's smile could matter more than a multimillion-dollar deal. 3 days ago, Harrison Cole had been a different man entirely. When personal crisis collides with corporate scandal, which matters more, protecting your business empire or protecting the people who showed you what love looks like? Don't forget to subscribe to see how Harrison chooses between power and kindness, and let us know in the comments what you would do in his situation. Chicago General Hospital's emergency waiting room buzzed with the controlled chaos of human crisis. Harrison Cole stood at the information desk, his expensive suit and commanding presence completely out of place among the worried families and overworked medical staff. "I'm looking for Denise Washington," he told the receptionist, his voice tight with urgency. "She was brought in this morning." "Are you family?" the tired-looking woman asked without looking up from her computer screen. "I'm her employer." "Immediate family only in the ICU, sir. You'll need to wait for someone to come out with information." Harrison felt helpless in a way that no boardroom negotiation had ever made him feel. Money, influence, corporate connections, none of his usual tools meant anything in this sterile environment where human suffering took precedence over business hierarchies. "Uncle Harrison." The small voice cut through his frustration like sunlight through storm clouds. He turned to see Amara Washington sitting in a plastic chair near the window, her bright red dress wrinkled and her usually perfect braids showing signs of a long, difficult morning. She wasn't alone. An elderly African-American woman sat beside her, holding Amara's hand with the patient strength of someone accustomed to life's unexpected emergencies. "Amara," Harrison said, kneeling down to her level. "Sweetheart, what happened to your mama?" "She fell down at home this morning," Amara explained, her voice smaller than Harrison had ever heard it. "She was making breakfast and then she just fell down and wouldn't wake up." The elderly woman extended her hand to Harrison. "I'm Dorothy Washington, Denise's grandmother. And you must be the Mr. Cole that Amara has been talking about non-stop." "Harrison," he said, shaking her hand and noting the strength in her grip. "Please, what do the doctors say?" Dorothy's expression was carefully neutral, the look of someone who had learned to hope for the best while preparing for difficult news. "Stroke. They're running tests to determine the extent of the damage, but she's unconscious and they can't say when she might wake up." Harrison felt as if someone had punched him in the chest. Denise, who worked 2 jobs to support her daughter and grandmother, who cleaned office buildings with quiet dignity, who had raised a child capable of believing in magic cookies, was fighting for her life 3 floors above them. "What can I do?" he asked, the question coming from somewhere deeper than corporate protocol or social obligation. "Nothing right now," Dorothy replied. "We wait and pray and trust that God has a plan we can't see yet." Harrison looked at Amara, who was studying his face with the same serious concentration she had shown when evaluating his sadness levels. "Uncle Harrison, are you going to help Mama get better?" The title Uncle Harrison hit him like an emotional earthquake. When was the last time anyone had claimed him as family? When was the last time a child had looked at him with complete confidence that he would make everything right? "I'm going to do everything I can," he promised, meaning it more completely than any business commitment he had ever made. Over the next 4 hours, Harrison learned more about the Washington family than he had discovered about any of his employees in 15 years of business. Dorothy had raised Denise after her parents died in a car accident, working as a school janitor for 40 years to provide stability and love. Denise had finished college while working full-time, determined to build a better life for the daughter she was raising as a single mother. Amara's father had left when she was 6 months old, but Dorothy insisted that his absence had made their family stronger rather than broken. "That child has more love in her little finger than most adults carry in their whole hearts," Dorothy said, watching Amara color in a donated coloring book with determined concentration. Denise made sure of that. "How did she manage?" Harrison asked. "Working, studying, raising Amara?" "The same way people have always managed when they don't have any choice," Dorothy replied with matter-of-fact wisdom. "One day at a time, one problem at a time, with faith that love will carry you through whatever comes next." Well, there was that word again, the ingredient that Amara insisted made everything better. Harrison was beginning to understand that for the Washington family, love wasn't a sentiment or emotion. It was a practical force, a decision they made every day to prioritize each other's well-being above personal comfort. Around 2 o'clock, a doctor emerged from the elevator with the careful expression of someone carrying mixed news. "Mrs. Washington." Dorothy stood up with the dignified composure of someone who had faced difficult news before. "How is she, doctor?" "The stroke was significant, but she's stable. We've managed to restore blood flow, and there's reason for cautious optimism. However, the next 48 hours will be critical." "Can we see her?" Amara asked, her small voice cutting through the medical terminology. The doctor looked at the little girl with gentle eyes. "She's unconscious right now, sweetheart. But you can sit with her for a few minutes if you'd like." As they walked toward the elevator, Harrison made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors. "Dorothy, I'd like to cover all of Denise's medical expenses. No insurance copays, no bills, no financial stress while she recovers." Dorothy stopped walking and looked at him with surprise. "Mr. Cole, that's very generous, but..." "Please?" Harrison said, and he meant it. Let me do this. And what about Amara's care while Denise is in the hospital? Dorothy continued. I'm 78 years old. I can manage for a few days, but if this recovery takes weeks or months. Harrison looked down at Amara, who was holding his hand with the trusting grip of a child who believed adults could fix anything. In that moment he realized that everything in his life had led to this choice. All the money, all the power, all the carefully constructed empire, it all meant nothing compared to making sure this remarkable little girl didn't lose faith in magic cookies and healing kindness. She'll have whatever she needs, he said firmly. Childcare, tutors, whatever it takes. And when Denise is ready to come home, they'll have a home to come to. Dorothy studied his face for a long moment. Why? She asked simply. Harrison looked at Amara, who was watching their conversation with the patient attention of someone accustomed to adults making important decisions about her life. How could he explain that her granddaughter had saved his soul with a chocolate chip cookie and a belief in love's healing power? Because, he said finally, Amara taught me that kindness is magic. And I want to make sure she never stops believing that. The news of Harrison Cole personally camping out in a hospital waiting room spread through Chicago's business community like wildfire. By Saturday morning, gossip columnists were speculating about secret relationships, financial reporters were questioning his mental stability, and his own board members were demanding explanations for his increasingly erratic behavior. Harrison ignored all of it. For the first time in his adult life, he had discovered something more important than his reputation. He spent Saturday morning in Denise's hospital room, watching Amara read picture books aloud to her unconscious mother while Dorothy dozed in the uncomfortable visitor's chair. The sight of this small family facing crisis with dignity and hope taught him more about courage than any business negotiation ever had. Uncle Harrison, Amara said during a break from reading. Do you think Mama can hear the stories? I think she can hear everything, Harrison replied, though he had no medical evidence to support the claim. I think she especially loves hearing your voice. Grandma Dorothy says talking to sick people helps their hearts remember how to be strong. Harrison thought about his own heart, which had been sick with loneliness and anger for so many years that he had forgotten it was capable of healing. Maybe Amara's voice had worked the same magic on him that she was trying to work on her mother. Your grandma is very wise. She says wisdom comes from paying attention to love instead of paying attention to fear. The simple statement hit Harrison like a revelation. How much of his life had been driven by fear? Fear of betrayal, fear of failure, fear of appearing weak, fear of trusting anyone completely. Meanwhile, this 6-year-old girl operated from a foundation of love so solid that even her mother's medical crisis couldn't shake her faith in goodness. On Sunday morning, Harrison made a decision that sent shockwaves through Cole Industries. He called an emergency board meeting, not to discuss the Morrison acquisition or damage control strategies, but to announce a complete restructuring of the company's employee policies. Effective immediately, he told the 12 stunned executives, we're implementing comprehensive healthcare coverage for all employees and their families. No copays, no deductibles, no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. Richard Hastings leaned forward in his chair. Cole, do you have any idea what that will cost the company? Approximately $12 million annually, Harrison replied. Less than what we spent on executive bonuses last year. But the shareholders? We'll learn that companies built on employee loyalty and well-being outperform companies built on fear and cost-cutting. We're also implementing emergency family leave policies, childcare assistance, and educational support programs. Patricia Stevens looked as if Harrison had announced plans to give away the company's entire profit margin to charity. This is financial suicide. You're talking about social welfare programs, not business strategies. Harrison thought about Denise working 2 jobs to support her family, about Dorothy raising a granddaughter on a janitor's pension, about Amara growing up in a world where a medical emergency could destroy everything her family had worked to build. I'm talking about recognizing that our employees are human beings with families, dreams, and crises that affect their ability to contribute to our success, he said. I'm talking about building a company culture based on mutual respect rather than economic desperation. The meeting ended with threats of board votes and investor complaints, but Harrison felt more confident about his leadership than he had in years. For the first time, his business decisions were aligned with his values rather than contradicting them. On Monday morning, word of the new employee policies spread through Cole Industries like sunshine after a storm. Productivity increased as workers realized they no longer had to choose between family emergencies and job security. Morale improved as people discovered their employer actually cared about their well-being. But the most significant change wasn't in corporate statistics. It was in Harrison himself. He started learning his employees' names, asking about their families, remembering details about their lives outside the office. He instituted walking meetings that took him through different departments, where he listened to suggestions and concerns with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Margaret from accounting stopped him in the hallway to thank him for the healthcare changes that would allow her twin babies to receive specialized treatment. James from marketing mentioned that the emergency leave policy meant he could care for his aging father without risking his career. Each conversation reinforced Harrison's growing understanding that kindness wasn't just personally fulfilling. It was also good business. Employees who felt valued worked harder, stayed longer, and contributed more creative solutions to company challenges. On Tuesday evening, Harrison returned to the hospital with a special delivery. He had spent the afternoon learning to bake chocolate chip cookies, following Amara's detailed instructions about the secret ingredient of love. "Uncle Harrison," Amara exclaimed when she saw the carefully wrapped package. "Did you make magic cookies?" "I tried," Harrison said, suddenly nervous about whether his baking skills would meet a 6-year-old's standards. "But I'm not sure I got the love part right." Amara unwrapped one of the cookies and took a thoughtful bite. Her face lit up with surprise and delight. "You did get it right. I can taste the love. It tastes like hoping someone feels better." Harrison felt tears threaten at the corners of his eyes. When was the last time anyone had tasted hope in something he had created? When was the last time he had put love into any of his efforts rather than just ambition and control? "There's something different about these cookies," Dorothy observed, accepting one with a grateful smile. "They taste like they were made by someone who understands what healing feels like." As they shared the cookies in Denise's hospital room, with machines beeping softly and late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, Harrison realized that this was what happiness felt like. Not the satisfaction of crushing a competitor or closing a profitable deal, but the simple joy of bringing comfort to people he cared about. The boy who had been taught that sentiment was weakness, the man who had built an empire on emotional isolation, had finally learned that love multiplied rather than divided when it was shared freely. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of Denise's breathing, in the sweet taste of cookies made with hope, in the warm pressure of a child's hand holding his, Harrison Cole discovered that his heart had been waiting 42 years to learn how to love. Wednesday morning brought the news everyone had been praying for. Dr. Martinez emerged from Denise's room with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from the medical staff in 4 days. "She's awake," he announced to the small group gathered in the waiting area. Conscious, responsive, and asking for her daughter. Amara launched herself from her chair like a rocket, but Dorothy's gentle hand caught her before she could race toward the elevator. "Slow down, baby girl. Your mama needs quiet visits, not excited bouncing." Harrison watched the reunion through the door window, his heart full as Amara carefully climbed onto the hospital bed and nestled against her mother's side. Denise looked fragile and tired, but her eyes held the same warmth that had produced such an extraordinary daughter. "She wants to see you," Dorothy said when she emerged from the room 20 minutes later. Harrison felt nervous in a way that no corporate presentation had ever made him feel. This conversation would determine everything: whether his growing feelings for this remarkable family were welcome, whether his transformation from cold businessman to caring human being was believable, whether love really could bridge the gap between two completely different worlds. "Harrison," Denise said softly when he entered her room. Her voice was hoarse from the breathing tube, but her smile was radiant. "Amara tells me you've been taking very good care of us." "She's been taking care of me," Harrison replied, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "Your daughter saved my life with a chocolate chip cookie." Denise laughed, a sound like music after days of medical machinery and worried whispers. "She has strong opinions about the healing power of baked goods." "She has strong opinions about the healing power of love," Harrison corrected gently. "And she's absolutely right." They talked for an hour about Amara's week, about the hospital staff's kindness, about everything except the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them. Finally, Denise asked the question that had been hanging in the air since he first showed up at the hospital. "Why are you here, Harrison? Really here, not just paying bills or fulfilling employer obligations? Why are you sitting in my hospital room holding my hand?" Harrison looked at their intertwined fingers, his pale against her rich brown skin, and realized he had never held hands with anyone for comfort rather than show. "Because somewhere between a magic cookie and a chocolate chip revelation, I fell in love with your family. With Amara's wisdom and your strength and the way you've created something beautiful despite all the challenges life has thrown at you." "And," Denise prompted gently. "And I fell in love with you," Harrison admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. With your grace and your dignity and the way you see goodness in the world even when the world hasn't been particularly good to you. Denise was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with the same serious concentration that Amara used when evaluating cookie magic. Harrison, my life is complicated. I'm a single mother with medical bills and student loans and a grandmother who needs care. I work 2 jobs and live in a tiny apartment and shop at discount stores. I'm not the kind of woman who usually catches the attention of billionaires. You're exactly the kind of woman who should catch everyone's attention, Harrison said firmly. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You've built a life filled with love and hope and kindness despite having every reason to be bitter and tired and cynical. But what happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when you remember that we come from completely different worlds? Harrison thought about his empty penthouse apartment, his sterile office, his life of expensive loneliness before Amara offered him a cookie. The only world I want to live in is the one where kindness matters more than money, where love is the most important ingredient in everything we create, where a little girl can teach a grown man how to smile. Denise squeezed his hand gently. That's a beautiful world, Harrison. But real life has grocery bills and school supplies and car repairs. Real life has disagreements and bad days and moments when love feels harder than it looks in fairy tales. Then let's figure out real life together, Harrison said. Let me learn how to be part of a family that operates on love instead of fear. Let me discover what it means to build something lasting with someone who sees the best in people instead of looking for their weaknesses. And if your board of directors thinks you've lost your mind, if your business associates think you've gone soft, if your whole carefully constructed empire suffers because you're dating the janitor. Harrison laughed, realizing how little those concerns mattered compared to the possibility of loving and being loved by these remarkable women. Then I'll build a different kind of empire. One where success is measured by how many people we help rather than how much money we accumulate. Denise studied his face for another long moment, then smiled with the radiance that had first attracted him during that midnight encounter in his office lobby. Amara told me that you taste like hope when you make cookies. I think I'd like to discover what that means. Does that mean? It means I'd like to see if a billionaire and a janitor can figure out how to make magic together, Denise said, lifting their joined hands to her lips and pressing a gentle kiss to his knuckles. It means I'm willing to believe that love really can bridge any gap if both people are brave enough to cross it. Outside in the waiting area, Amara was explaining to her grandmother why Uncle Harrison and Mama were taking so long to talk. They're probably discussing the magic cookies, she said with 6-year-old certainty. Adults always need more time to understand magic than kids do. Dorothy smiled, thinking about the transformation she had witnessed in Harrison Cole over the past week. Maybe they're discussing more than cookies, baby girl. Maybe, Amara agreed. But magic is magic, whether it comes in cookies or hugs or people who choose love instead of being scared. As if summoned by her words, Harrison and Denise emerged from the hospital room hand in hand, their faces glowing with the same radiance that Amara carried wherever she went. Love had indeed found a way. 3 months later, Cole Industries had become the most sought-after employer in Chicago. The employee wellness programs Harrison had implemented after Denise's stroke had transformed not just the company culture, but the entire corporate landscape. Other businesses scrambled to match the benefits and family-friendly policies that were attracting top talent to Cole Industries. But the most significant changes weren't reflected in productivity reports or employee satisfaction surveys. They were visible in the laughter that now echoed through hallways that had once been silent with fear, in the family photos that appeared on desks where nervous efficiency had previously reigned, in the genuine smiles that replaced the artificial politeness of corporate survival. Harrison's office had been transformed as well. The intimidating glass and steel fortress had given way to a warm space filled with Amara's artwork, family photos, and a cookie jar that was perpetually full of homemade treats. The corner where he had once brooded alone now contained a small reading area where Amara did homework while her mother finished her evening cleaning rounds. Because despite Harrison's repeated offers to support them financially, Denise had insisted on continuing her work at Cole Industries. This job is how we met, she explained. It's part of our story and I'm not ready to let that go. What she had agreed to was a promotion to head of facilities management, a position that utilized her organizational skills and attention to detail while providing a salary that reflected her true value to the company. Dorothy had accepted Harrison's offer to move into a beautiful apartment near their new home, where she could maintain her independence while being close enough to help with Amara's care. On this particular Thursday evening, Harrison was experiencing the nervous excitement that had become familiar over the past 3 months of family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend adventures. Tonight was different though. Tonight, he had a question to ask that would determine the future of the most important relationship of his life. "Uncle Harrison," Amara said as they shared their evening snack in his office. "You look excited and scared at the same time. That's very observant, sweetheart. How did you know?" "Your happy face and your worried face are trying to happen together," she explained with scientific precision. "It makes a very interesting expression." Denise looked up from the quarterly reports she had been reviewing, her eyes warm with affection for both her daughter and the man who had become such an integral part of their family. "What's making you excited and worried, Harrison?" "Actually, I have something I'd like to discuss with both of you," Harrison said, his heart beating faster than it had during any corporate negotiation. "Amara, you know how much I love you and your mama, right?" "Yes," Amara replied with absolute certainty. "You love us the same way we love you. All the way love." "All the way love," Harrison repeated, savoring the phrase. "That's exactly right. And when people love each other all the way, sometimes they want to make it official." Amara's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Are you going to ask Mama to marry you?" "I was thinking about it," Harrison admitted. "But first I wanted to ask you if that would be okay. Marriage means I would become your stepfather, which is a very important job. It means promising to take care of you and love you and help make decisions about your life for as long as you'll let me." Amara considered this information with the gravity it deserved. "Would you still be Uncle Harrison, or would I call you something different?" "You could call me whatever feels right to you. Uncle Harrison, Dad Harrison, or anything else that makes you happy. And you would come to my school plays and help with homework and make sure I never run out of magic cookies. Every school play, all the homework you want help with, and I promise to keep the cookie jar full forever." Amara nodded decisively. "Then yes, I think you should marry Mama. But you have to ask her the right way." "What's the right way?" "On one knee, with a pretty ring, and you have to tell her all the reasons why you love her so she knows you're serious." Harrison looked at Denise, who was watching this exchange with tears of joy streaming down her face. "What do you think, Mama? Should I ask you the right way?" "I think," Denise said, her voice thick with emotion, "that I've been waiting for you to ask me the right way since the night you first tasted magic cookies." Harrison pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer, then lowered himself to one knee beside Denise's chair. Amara clapped her hands together with delight, and somewhere in the building below, late shift employees paused in their work as news of the proposal spread through the coal industry's family. "Denise Washington," Harrison began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I love you because you see strength where others see weakness, because you choose kindness when cynicism would be easier, because you've created magic in the most ordinary moments. I love you because you raised a daughter who believes in healing cookies and all the way love, because you taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with." He opened the ring box to reveal a simple, elegant solitaire that caught the office lights like captured starlight. "I love you because you made me remember that my heart was capable of more than just protecting itself. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life learning how to love like you do?" "Yes," Denise whispered, then louder, "Yes, Harrison Cole. I'll marry you." As Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger and Amara cheered with unrestrained joy, none of them noticed the small commotion in the building lobby 47 floors below. Security cameras had captured every moment of the proposal, and word was spreading through social media with the viral intensity of a story that restored faith in love's power to transform lives. But the biggest surprise came 3 days later, when Harrison received a call that would reveal the final piece of their extraordinary puzzle. "Mr. Cole," his lawyer said, his voice carrying an unusual mixture of confusion and amazement. "We've completed the background check you requested on the Washington family, and we've discovered something remarkable." "What kind of something?" "Amara Washington isn't just any 6-year-old girl. She's your goddaughter." Harrison felt the world tilt on its axis. "That's impossible. 25 years ago, you were best man at your college roommate Michael Washington's wedding. You agreed to be godfather to any children he and his wife might have. Michael and Patricia Washington died in a car accident when their daughter Denise was 12 years old." The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. Michael Washington, his roommate and closest friend during college, who had died tragically young along with his wife, leaving behind a daughter who had been raised by her grandmother. Denise was Michael's daughter, which made Amara his goddaughter by the terms of a promise he had made decades ago and forgotten in the busy accumulation of wealth and power. "Michael always said that promises mattered more than contracts," Harrison said quietly, remembering his friend's unwavering belief in honor and commitment. "He said that the people we choose to love become our real family." "It appears he was right," the lawyer replied. Technically, you've been Amara's godfather for her entire life. The universe simply took 25 years to bring you together. That evening, as Harrison shared this incredible revelation with Denise and Amara, he understood that their love story had been written long before a little girl offered him a cookie. It had been written in college friendships and sacred promises, in Dorothy's prayers for her granddaughter's future, in Denise's determination to raise her daughter with love despite life's challenges. "Daddy Michael," Amara said when Denise showed her photos of the parents she had never known. "He looks like he would have made good cookies too. He would have loved you so much," Denise said, holding her daughter close. "And I think he would be very happy that Uncle Harrison kept his promise, even if it took a little while." Harrison looked at the photo of his young friend, remembering Michael's infectious laughter and unshakable faith in goodness. "I think he would say that some promises are worth waiting for, and that love always finds a way to keep its word." As they sat together in their new family circle, sharing cookies and stories and plans for a future filled with hope, Harrison realized that Amara had been right about magic all along. Love was indeed the secret ingredient that transformed everything it touched, turning broken hearts into healing, loneliness into belonging, and strangers into family. The billionaire who had been afraid to trust anyone had found his way home through the wisdom of a 6-year-old girl who believed that kindness could heal the world, one cookie at a time. And in the end, she had been absolutely right.